IATR's 31st annual conference. We thought we'd liven it up with some music this morning. There'll be lots of analogies to regulators and Rocky as the conference goes on. First of all, it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce our IATR board chair, Jim Nye, who has been not only a steadfast and reliable and dedicated board member for over a decade, but also our board chair and a great public servant who works for the Philadelphia Parking Authority. And he's going to introduce our conference host, Scott Petri. And without further ado, Captain Jim Nye, the regulator guy.
Thank you, Matt. As always, I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce to you a man I first met about 13 or 14 years ago, but only really got to know over the past 8 months when he became executive director of the Philadelphia Parking Authority, my agency, where I worked for many years. When I first met Scott, he was a first-term representative in the Pennsylvania legislature, and I've recently been named transition director to oversee the transfer of regulatory authority for taxis and limousines in Philadelphia from the Pennsylvania PUC. Scott went on to accomplish many great things during his time in the legislature, and as an advocate for child protection, Scott is the recipient of the Champion for Children Award by the Pennsylvania Partnerships for Children for his legislation to strengthen the child protection laws in Pennsylvania. A lawyer by profession, Scott was known in the legislature for his effective negotiation skills and keen eye toward eliminating waste and finding efficiencies to make government not only more effective, but more transparent. For all of these reasons, I think Scott is exactly who the Parking Authority needs at the helm right now. In these past 8 months, he has hit the ground running, gotten a good handle on our operations, which is no small feat, and focused particularly on those problems which can only be fixed through legislative solutions, including, of course, issues with respect to regulation of TNCs and other for-hire services in Philadelphia. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Scott Petri.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming to Philadelphia for this year's conference of the International Association of Transportation Regulators. I want to especially thank your president, Matt, and your board chair, Jim, for their leadership and hard work in preparing for this conference, which is the first to be held here in our fair city, which Philadelphia often refers to as the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. As the country's only city with the designation of World Heritage City, we have an amazing array of things to do and see and places to go and visit. Along with famous landmarks such as the Liberty Bell, the Constitution Center, and Independence Hall, there are a number of world-renowned museums, including the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Franklin Institute, and the recently opened Museum of the American Revolution, my personal favorite. As a fan of history, the last exhibit in that facility will make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I'm not going to ruin your surprise. Don't read about what's there, just go and experience it. As far as dining and nightlife goes, you'll find everything from some of the top-rated restaurants in the country to open beer gardens with their own brand of tasting offerings, shops with many different versions of food, and everyone attempts to imitate the Philly cheesesteak. But only in Philly will you find a real Philly cheesesteak. Everything else is fake. And of course, Philadelphia is passionate about its sports, the Phillies and the world champion Eagles. I do not suggest rooting for any team other than the home team if you go. Fans do not really boo safe airplane landings like one of my elementary school friends suggested years ago when he was doing a sports broadcast in Indianapolis. It was Santa that got pelted with snowballs at our old stadium, but he did deserve it. After all, the Eagles stunk at that time, and it had to be Santa's fault. All of these anecdotes tell you what Philly is really about. We are strong critics of ourselves, we are gritty, but we join together when it comes to celebrating all that is good about Philadelphia. You know, the Philly special, made famous during the Super Bowl, is not just a football play, it's a way towards success. And we have a short vignette that's going to describe what the Philadelphia Parking Authority does.
The Philadelphia Parking Authority has a variety of responsibilities that guides our everyday functions. We administer Philadelphia's red light camera program to deter red light running at the city's most dangerous intersections. We offer convenient and modestly priced parking options through 7 Center City garages, 3 of which were just rated as premier by the International Parking Institute. Through operating and maintaining over 30 neighborhood lots, we also provide convenient parking options to Philadelphia's neighborhoods. We also provide state-of-the-art parking options at Philadelphia International Airport. In an effort to keep the traveling public safe, we also regulate Philadelphia's taxi and limousine services, as well as transportation network companies such as Uber and Lyft. And of course, we enforce Philadelphia's parking regulations to ensure a safe and continuous traffic flow for Philadelphia's residents and visitors. It is through these efforts that over $900 million in revenue has been dispersed to various government agencies in the past 10 years. Reaching these goals would not have been possible without the hard work from our very dedicated staff. We thank you for being here, and we look forward to our continued dialogue and partnership moving forward.
Okay, so that tells you a little bit about what we do. I wanted to move on to some of our responsibilities, but what I want to first talk about is what good about Philadelphia includes a city whose economy is larger than many small nations, a place where people come to engage in commerce, seek critical services that make their lives better. People come to play, enjoy culture, and experience history. The Philadelphia Parking Authority plays a role in all of those activities. After all, if you drive into the city, a parking spot or access to the curb for drop-off is not your ultimate destination. How the curb is managed and will be managed in the future is a central discussion. Congestion in cities has grown substantially, eliminating idling and the loss of productive time for workers from driving around the block looking for parking is something every city has to deal with, utilizing good public policy, technology, and cooperation among transportation partners. A truly multimodal regulatory agency today, the Philadelphia Parking Authority was originally created in 1950 as a result of legislation aimed at establishing off-street parking garages and lots to aid in commercial development in various areas around the city. In 1982, we were given the responsibility of managing all on-street curbside parking, including development of parking regulations, installation of meters and signs, issuance of parking enforcement citations, along with booting and towing powers and collection of parking meter revenue. We operate long-term and short-term parking at the Philadelphia International Airport, as you saw, which totals over 20,000 spots overall. Big picture, our organization produces $265 million of revenue a year, and we return agency-wide 40% of every dollar to some government entity. If we were a private entity, I've been told our cash value is worth over $1 billion, and our assets are probably worth well in excess of $500 million. In the years since we've taken on additional administrative and regulatory powers in the form of red light photo enforcement program to curtail vehicle crashes at dangerous intersections, registration suspension powers for those with unpaid violations, and the ability to tow and impound vehicles with inspired inspection stickers or insurance cards. Ultimately, of course, we assume responsibility for regulation of medallion taxi cabs, partial rights taxi cabs, limousines, and airport transfer vans in years in Philadelphia from the Pennsylvania PUC. Soon, we will likely have responsibility for speed cameras in a pilot program on one of the more dangerous roadways in the country. Over the past year, the authority applied for and received accreditation with distinction from the International Parking Institute. And like your organization, the IPI provides educational advancement, networking, and training. The ability to discuss common policies, to learn what other organizations are doing to address common problems, and to be able to discuss these concepts with elected officials is central to both IPI and your organization. Enhanced levels of safety, accessibility, equity, quality of life, and convenience are increasingly considered to be essential goals which must be pursued and attained by government for its traveling public, including those in wheelchairs, on bicycles, and on foot. Complete Streets and other such programs launched by the City of Philadelphia, Vision Zero, and cities all over the world in recent years evidence this greater attention to detail in regulation and management of local streets and transportation resources. Congestion management measures have never been more important as city streets grow more crowded with traffic caused by growing residential populations with an ever-increasing numbers of TNC and delivery vehicles catering to them and to our growing tourism and business travel sectors. In Philadelphia, TNCs and taxis now represent over 125,000 trips per day. For the Philadelphia Parking Authority's part, we will be pursuing various pieces of legislation in the near term aimed at increasing traffic and rider safety and security, curbing congestion, and enhancing the quality of life in the city. Changes in the 2016 law requiring the PPA to regulate TNCs along with taxi cabs and limos will be sought to not only alter the method by which assessments are paid by the industry, but also restoring revenue to adequately fund enforcement. In my opinion, a strong regulator should be welcomed by the industry. In a weak regulatory environment, scoffers grow and the reputation of the industry declines because of bad actors. A strong regulator is the local watchdog that helps ensure proper conduct by employees or agents of industry owners. While self-regulation by operators is important, it cannot substitute for uniform, independent regulation which promotes fairness of competition, safe operations, and protections for customers. Simply said, if I was sitting in an office in San Francisco, I would want strong local regulators. It would make me sleep better at night. Also being proposed is legislation that would allow not only Philadelphia, but municipalities throughout the Commonwealth to designate congestion zones where applicable. The proposal provides for enabling language for use of new technologies, including automated photo enforcement in bus zones, loading zones, and at intersections in order to curb congestion and promote public safety. Also being discussed is allowing parking enforcement officers to aid in enforcement of some non-parking congestion and quality of life-oriented violations as requested by other partners and communities. Finally, we are currently reevaluating and considering increases to fines and fees for any curbside parking restrictions and public service programs involving use of that space, which might impact traffic flow and consequently cause congestion. Actually, on this note, I recently heard the mayor and city council are favorable. Fees for contractor parking permits, fines for parking in bus zones and loading zones, corner clearances, rush hour restrictions, and bike lanes are all fair game. I believe measures such as these can significantly impact in a positive way the levels of congestion, safety, and quality of life of the traveling public in Philadelphia. The action taken recently by the New York City Council to cap licenses for 1 year for TNC vehicles in the name of congestion mitigation and air quality protection is quite admirable. It is possible one of the most impactful decisions that could be taken in this regard in any big city today. Could this signal a renewed awareness of the value of government regulation in protecting the public? A sign of the proverbial regulatory pendulum swinging back to its rightful place where reasonable restrictions are established to balance the interests of all concerned parties. When I attended the annual meeting of IPI earlier this year, every city indicated a greater need for enforcement at the curb to mitigate congestion. Many of us here today would like to have our governing bodies take this step as well. Unless you press your legislatures, what will likely happen in most cases, however, is a wait-and-see approach to see how or if a cap impacts for-vehicle hire services in New York City. Having served in the legislature for 15 years, 1 month, and 1 day, not that I was counting, but my pension did, I know the value of hearing from constituents. Do not sit idly by. Express your concern. Be active. Advocate for good public policy. And most of all, identify to elected officials the other cities who have the regulatory environment you seek, and those cities seeking what you need to be effective regulators. Lobby and never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Individually, we have no strength in our voice. Together, we can have a profound impact. Though I cannot be sure that New Jersey copied off of our proposal introduced early this year to impose a 50-cent regulatory fee, I'm certainly going to say they did. Now that New Jersey has adopted a statewide fee, it makes it easier for us to convince the Pennsylvania legislature that this approach has merit. This is how it works. You put your good public policy together, you put your requests together, you identify other communities that have what you need and you want, and you go to the legislature and you put it, as my good colleague Christine Kerlin says, in their face. Identify what they did that's wrong, that what needs to be done, make it real. And I guarantee you will get a favorable response. You know, when new services come along, as a legislator, you're listening to your constituents who want these services, and they are great services, and we all use them. But in the end, it's not easy to understand how new technology will impact people. And your role is about public safety. And if you're not advocating for public safety, who will? Who will? That's your role, that's your job. Wear it with pride and continue to fight for what you know is correct. Have a great time in Philly. I hope you enjoy it. Philly, Philly.